up, everybody? Welcome to day number 4. We are now 4/5 of the way through the 5-day challenge, and today I am going to be teaching you how to avoid something called the Valley of Death. Cue the ominous music. This sounds very scary thing, and I will tell you, it is a very real thing, and it does happen during the follow-up, and it is also, in my experience, it is one of the biggest traps that people fall into that keeps them from seeing the results that they want. So today, here's what you're going to be learning. You're going to be learning specifically, what do you do and what do you say? We're going to be getting deep into some scripts and some approaches, right? So this is going to be a really tactical training. But what do you do and say to someone once they've watched your third-party tool, right? So hopefully at this point you've had some people earlier in the week that you shared a third-party tool with, and you're now have a follow-up scheduled with them, and you need to know what to do and say, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And when we get into talking about this concept of the Valley of Death, what a lot of you are going to realize, this is where you've been going wrong. And it's called the Valley of Death because this is where most network marketers, businesses go to die, and we do not want that happening to any of you any longer. So, all right, so listen, before I get into the content for today, I do want to know from all of you, how many of you took me up on my challenge yesterday? How many of you were able to connect with at least one person yesterday to make that deposit into their relational account? I did see a lot of you sharing in the group, and I was excited to see that you saw some early results from that. So if you haven't had a chance to do that yet, make sure that you stay on here. And here's what I will promise you. Making what we talked about yesterday, making that one of the kind of keystone habits of your business, right? One of the income, generating activities that you do. And we're gonna get into the power of habits tomorrow in the final day. But if you can make this a regular practice in your business, I'm telling you, it will reap such huge dividends for you over time. And it's just having that long-term mindset of cultivating and growing your relationships with the people in your network. So, okay, well listen, congrats to all of you that did the assignment, but let's get into today's training. So, I want to remind you, I want to go back to the getting started video. And one of the most important messages that I needed to give all of you ahead of time, and it's really where I see people, it's the biggest mistake by far people make when it comes to recruiting and building a team, is that they make themselves the expert. And just a quick reminder, what that means is, if you are the one doing all the explaining and answering questions when you're sharing your products or business with someone, that's you being the expert, and what that does is it chases people away. So in the Getting Started video, I taught you can't do that in the first interaction, and hopefully a lot of you received that. But here's where we make the big mistake. The fatal mistake that most people make is when it comes to the follow-up, they actually forget about that. So they didn't make themselves the expert in the first interaction, but then during the follow-up, all that goes out the window, and we fall into the trap of answering questions and explaining. And what we don't realize is that has the same effect. It chases people away from wanting to pursue this as a business. And this is why we call it the Valley of Death, because this is the point where your prospect decides, I may want to become a customer, but when it comes to me doing what I see you doing, it's not really something I think I can or am willing to do. And I want to remind you of two very important points that I made in the Getting Started training that also apply here in the follow-up. Number one, the less that you say, the more you are likely to make. So you start saying less, keep it simple, and you'll be more successful. Now, I will tell you, in my experience, especially if you've been doing it wrong for a while, There's nothing harder than saying less, right? There's nothing harder than learning how to not be the expert, especially if you're used to doing that. But I'm also telling you there's nothing you will do that will have a better impact on your results. So that's number one. Less you say, the more likely you are to make. Number two is this. You must always be demonstrating to your prospect that yours is a simple business. And what you have to realize is just step back for a second. Put yourself in the shoes of the prospect. If they see you go into expert mode, answering the questions, explaining, doing all this stuff, what you're really demonstrating to them is this is not a simple business. You have to have all the answers. You have to be educated. You have to have the time. And what winds up happening is that's why they get chased away. Now, here's the thing, and this is where I know some of you struggle with this. Because quite frankly, here's what happens. Over time, we accumulate a lot of knowledge about our products and our business. And we have a level of success. And what winds up happening is our ego begins to grow a little, gets a little puffed up. So when you hear a training like this, for those of you that struggle with this, if you hear talk less, don't make it about you, that's kind of your ego attacks that idea. Well, what do you mean? I want people to think I'm credible. I want to be able to have the answers, right? I want that we have this thing that's really ego-based. But so we have this desire to want to answer it, especially if we know the answer, and we struggle with this. And here's what I want you to realize. It's not about you acting like you don't know the answer. It's about this. It's about you realizing it is more important that you demonstrate to your prospect that they can do this. You are actually, I teach this all the time. The training process for your new person doesn't start when they sign up. It starts with the very first moment you open your mouth to them. You are teaching them how to do the business. So we've got to buy into the overall good of selling them on the simplicity of the process. And if that means you say, hey, look, I've got a video that could just, do a much better job of explaining that than I could. You don't have to say, I don't know the answer to that. Or we have a video, and you can even say to people, what I love about this business is how simple it is. And I just want to show you, we have this video that answers that question. And I don't have to be the expert. See, you can completely flip it on the other side. Instead of making yourself the expert, say, look, what I love about this business, I don't have to be an expert. I don't have to have all the answers because we have these amazing tools. And what's happening is you're selling people on the system. They're like, wow, yeah, I can do that. So you have to understand those two things. The less you say, the more you make, and you must keep it simple. All right. So what if they have questions though, right? If you have an interested prospect, they're going to have questions. Questions are good. They're a sign of interest. Here's the key. The key to you saying less is taking the same principle that we applied on the first interaction and applying it here. If they have a question or an objection, you have to do your very best to answer it with another tool. Now that might mean you have another video that you send them. That might mean that there's a presentation, whether a recorded or a live one that you invite them to. That might mean that you get them on the phone with another person through a three-way call, or maybe a three-way group chat that sometimes is an easier step than getting someone on the phone. That might mean that you invite them to an actual event or something like that. Anything but you have to remember your job is not to deliver the facts and the figures, and you have to resist that. Now, I realize that that's not an easy thing to do, but it is important. So it brings the question up, well, what do you say, right? You actually have to say something. Well, that's what I'm going to share with you in the homework today and in the homework guide, and it's going to be really important that you have the guide for this one because there's a lot of scripts for today's homework. I give you a lot of important language. So I'm going to share with you what to say, but here's what I want you to think about. In the follow-up, here's what I want you to focus on. Number one, building a relationship with the prospect. And here's the way you do that. Sharing more of your personal experience or story. So this is during the follow-up, when you have someone that's expressing interest, this is the moment when you can really expound upon your story and your experience as a way to connect with them and relate to them and build a little bit more curiosity and value for what you're doing. So look, as long as you're talking about yourself and your experience, or maybe you're sharing other people's stories on your team, like maybe your prospect is a nurse and you know of a nurse on your team or just a nurse in the company, and you tell their story so they can relate to that. See, this is a great place to share stories, because at the end of the day, stories are the thing that really get people excited and sell them on the idea of doing what it is that you're doing. So share your story. Number 2, you need to ask them questions. See, here's what you have to realize. Either you're going to control the conversation or your prospect is going to control the conversation. Do not let them control the conversation. You started it. You can end it if you want. You take the reins and start asking them questions. Because when you start asking them questions and you get them talking, number 1, they feel more comfortable. Number 2, it's an opportunity for you to listen and get the information you need from them to figure out if they are a prospect. And that's what we're going to go through within the homework for you. What are the questions you ask and in what order? But then here's really the main focus for you. You just want to find out, are they interested enough to take the next step? That's the only thing at this point. The initial follow-up, you just want to know if they're interested. And here's the analogy that I use. And I'm going to take some pressure off of you right now. Your job is not to sell them or convince them in the follow-up, the first follow-up. That's not your job. See, a lot of us, we put too much pressure on ourselves because we think, well, I got to get them in. No, you don't get them interested. They're either interested or they're not interested. They're either interested enough to hear more about what you have to say or they're not. And I'm telling you, if they're not interested, just like we talked about yesterday, if they're not at 12 o'clock, there's nothing you're going to do and say that's going to matter. So here's what I want you to think about. Stop trying to sell and start sorting people. See, I was taught early in my career, and this was an analogy that always stuck with me and it helped me a lot, is that my job was not to sell or convince. My job was to sort them. Are you interested? And here's what you're going to find. Everyone you know is going to fall into one of 3 categories. And the analogy that we use are apples. So you're going to run into red apples. Now, red apples are probably less than 10% of people that you know. These are the people you're looking for. These are the ones that are at 12 o'clock. They're interested, right? A red apple, you follow up with them and they're like, man, this was awesome, right? I mean, it's like you don't even have to try. You don't, there's not really much training you have to give for red apples. You have red apple who loves the products, has a need or has a need for business. You just sign them up, right? Just like shut your mouth and sign them up. Because sometimes what we do is we get diarrhea of the mouth and we talk them right out of doing it. Like you have a red apple, right? And they're like, man, that was awesome. Here's all you need to say to a red apple. Wow. It sounds like you're all ready to get started. Sounds like you're ready to sign up now. Like literally go right for the close. Now, I know some of you are hearing me talk about red apples and you're like, dude, I've never come across one of those in my life. I got news for you. They're out there. Sometimes red apples come from places that you would very least expect it. That's the reason why I teach you never prejudge somebody that you think would or would not. Just be willing to approach everyone and sometimes you'd be surprised. But red apples are what they are. The second category of people, which is also probably about 10%, are what we call rotten apples. And rotten apples are people that just are not interested. And it doesn't matter what you do or say. Think of these as the negative kind of dream stealers. They want to knock you down. The people that they get uncomfortable when they see someone else they know trying to do something with their life because it's a reminder to them that they're too lazy or too afraid to even try. Right? These are the haters. And unfortunately, this is what makes this really difficult sometimes for people, because sometimes rotten apples come from people that we really love and know and trust. And that makes it really hard. But you have to understand, it's not necessarily in their mind. A lot of times rotten apples think they're helping you and not hurting you. But here's the key with rotten apples. Spend no time with them. Look, I will tell you in my experience, and this might be one of the best pieces of advice I could ever give you, there are not too many things that you will do in your career that will be more of a time suck or energy drain than trying to convince a rotten apple on the legitimacy of network marketing. Look, I remember early in my career, and we all know the P word that we're always afraid to hear, right? The pyramid. And I remember early in my career, I'd have people that would say, man, that's one of those pyramid things, right? Say it in a negative way. Like, just the way sometimes people say things to you. You're like, dude, you're such a rotten apple. But they would say it to me, and I would immediately go on the defensive, right? And I'd be like, what do you mean a pyramid? You work for a pyramid. How many people are at the top of your company? And blah, blah. Every company's a pyramid. Like, I would have this emotional, like I wanted to just defend it, right? You don't know. And here's what I realized. Never once in my life did I get into that exchange and have that person on the other end be like, hey, you know what? I do work for a pyramid. I think I better join. Never in my life did it ever. Here's all that wound up happening is I wound up straining that relationship. I wound up getting myself all worked up for nothing. So here's what I learned. And this was my mentor gave me this piece of advice. I'll tell you, I always laugh about it when I hear it, but it's so true. He goes, you know what, Bob? He goes, when you run into a rotten apple, here's what you do. Whatever they say about your business, let them be right and you go be rich. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, here's all I do. A rotten apple tells me that's a scam. I go, hey, you might be right. Thank you. And move on to the next person. Hey, that's a pyramid. You might be right. Go. See, there's no argument. Hey, well, thanks for thinking of me. You might be right. I'm going to try it anyway. Have a great day. That's all you do. See, they want you to argue. They want you to exchange. And when you don't, it surprises them. So stop trying to defend what you do to rotten apples. Stop trying to convince them. Listen, here's the analogy I want. What you're really looking for are red apples. And then the third category, which is the vast majority of people, are green apples. So green apples are like interested, but they have questions. They're not kind of right, not totally right. And I want you to imagine this, that the people imagine this big barrel. And it's just a bunch of apples in there. And your job is, man, you just want to sort those apples. You're in there and you're throwing them. You're like, this one's green and you're looking for the red, really. But occasionally, here's what's going to happen. You're going to find a rotten apple. Now, here's what I'll tell you about a rotten apple. And we've all had this, right? We've all bought the bag of apples and they got a rotten one in there. We didn't notice it. Like, we didn't see it was only rotten on one side. They looked red and then I found out they were rotten. Well, here's what what do you do when it happens? You get that sucker out of the bag and you can't throw it in the trash fast enough because the more that rotten apple can spoil the whole bunch. Now here's what you don't do. You don't get the apple and you don't say, oh, you're rotten. Well, let me see if I could just make you red. If I talk to you enough and I pump you up, maybe I just try to convince you. You don't have to be a rotten apple. You can be a red apple. I know it's in you. I know that you hate your life. I know you talk. But what if you don't do that? You can't. A rotten apple is what it is. Sort it out of the way, get away from it as quick as possible, and here's what you're looking for, red and green apples. And realize this, the green apples are where you will spend 99% of your time in your business. Now, there are varying levels of interest. You could have a green apple that's like barely interested, and you could have a green apple that's like almost red. And the key is you got to figure out where on the scale are they? And that's what I'm going to teach you to do today. But here's how this works. See, green apples just get put into the assembly line. Think of it like this. When we talk about like helping a green apple become red, what it really is it's the exposure process. And you hear this talked about a lot. And really the way this works is this. And depending on who you ask, you'll get a different answer. I'll just tell you this. In my experience, in order for a green apple to say yes, they need to be exposed to your products and business anywhere from 5 to 10 times. And that could be a lot of different things, right? It could be watching a video and then watching another video and then getting on a call or attending a training, or could be there's all different kinds of touch points or exposures. But they're going to need to see a bunch of stuff. So instead of putting so much pressure on you and saying, man, I got to get them, just let the process do the work for you. See, because if you can just keep moving them to the next step, what happens is every step builds up momentum for the actual close. The process does the work for you. So your job is this. Just focus on educating them and getting them to that next step. And then here's what you want to do. And this is where a lot of people drop the ball. There's not enough urgency or excitement. See, your job is move them from step to step with urgency and excitement. Because one of the secrets to getting more people to say yes is if you know it's going to take them 5 or 10 different touch points, here's the secret to success. If you can compress the time frames, like if you can make those 10 steps happen in a week as opposed to taking 2 to 3 weeks, that person that you can get through those steps in a week will have a 10 times greater chance of saying yes because you're building momentum up. See, so many people, they lose all their urgency when it comes to the follow-up. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make people, like if somebody tells me, hey, I'm going on vacation, I'm not going to make them get on a follow-up in the middle of vacation. That's just bad timing. But if they don't do it because I don't make it a priority, then that's where the issue is. So that's the thing. All right, now this leads me to the homework assignment for today. The homework assignment today is for you to find 5 prospects. Now, ideally, they're people earlier in the week, some of them that you've actually shared your tools with. So hopefully you have people that you need to follow up with, okay? They could be old prospects. They could be prospects that are still in the kind of in the funnel and they haven't said yes or they haven't said no, but you've not really followed up with them the way that I'm going to teach you here. But you want to pick 5 people and sort them. And I want you to have fun. We have some fun here, like in the back of the homework document. I've got the 5 names and we circle. Are they red, green, or rotten, right? Who's the person you follow up with? Are they red, green, or rotten? And then we've got a space for some notes for you to jot down some notes if they start, get them talking and you can write some stuff down. That's important. But I'm going to go through the process with you right now. And I'm going to go through this quickly, so don't get stressed out. Would you say it's all in the guide? I'm literally going to be reading the guide. But I want to go through the steps just to give you an overview of what you're going to do and answer any questions you have, and then I want you to get to work. So here's step number 1. The first step is you've got to have the initial sorting kind of conversation. And that happens really simply like this. You just ask them. And by the way, if you can do this live, and that means by phone or even Zoom or face-to-face, you'll be way more effective than just trying to do this through Messenger or voice message. If that's the only way you can do it, then that's fine. But try to schedule a live follow-up. Here's all you want to basically say to them, is you just first want to see what kind of apple are you. And you can do that a number of different ways. I always used to say, hey, look, what did you like best about what you saw? Wasn't that awesome? Like, what'd you like best? I just want to, I never wanted to ask somebody, what do you think? Because what do you think is weak language. It's almost kind of like you're not sure, so you're looking for them to validate. Now, even if you've used the opinion approach and you've said, hey, would you give me an opinion? You can still say, hey, what did you like best about what you saw? I'm curious. But I want to try to ask it more of a leading positive way to find out what they say. And now you might have a number of things happen. People might give you what they like best, or they might go right into the questions. Now, depending on what they say, here's basically what you're looking to figure out. If they start asking questions, then your response is kind of great. Hey, look, I definitely want to answer those questions for you. I've got some things that'll help you do that. But here's what I'm really looking to find out. And I'm telling you, some of you are going to be like, oh, I don't know. I'm going to ask that this sooner. The sooner you can start asking closing questions, the better. So here's the question I ask people literally in the first follow-up. I would say to them, hey, what'd you like best? They said, I thought the products were really cool. And here's what I say next. Well, hey, let me ask you this. Do you see an opportunity for yourself here? Do you see an opportunity maybe for you to become a customer? Or, or if you don't feel comfortable saying it that way, here's what you can say. Are you interested in learning more? It's a very non-threatening, simple way to say, hey, are you enough of a green apple to want to take the next step? Are you interested in learning more? And it's a simple question. It's a yes or no answer. And if at this point they say no, then all you do is you just move on and you thank them for your time. Now, if you're sharing your business with them and they say no, maybe this is a great opportunity for you to say, well, hey, would you be interested in the products? What's so funny? It's like all the time here's the kind of questions I'll get. They said no to the business to me. How do I find out if they would want to be a customer? Or how do I get them to try my products? And I kind of chuckle because I'm like, the obvious answer to me is always the answer. Just ask them, would you be interested in maybe trying the products? Oh, yeah, I never thought. It's like we make this so much more difficult than it needs to be. Just find out, sorting question, red, green, rotten, and I'm telling you, you will know by the way they respond to you if they are red, green, and rotten. You'll know reds right away. You will know rottens right away. Most people will give you green apple responses, okay? And listen, if you've used that opinion approach, or hey, anybody and then they come back to you and they say, hey, here's my opinion or whatever, then your question is just this: hey, did anyone come to mind that that might be interested? And if they tell you no, then all that means is they're also telling you that I would not be interested also. So you'll know by the way that they respond to you where they are. Okay, so that's step number one, just that initial conversation. Step number two is you're now thinking, okay, red, green, or rotten. We've already talked about red and rotten. We're concentrating on green. Now, here's the thing for green apples. We have to find out, how green are they? Are they on the red scale or on the rotten scale? And here's the way that we do that. And this is such a great question, because it's hard to get inside someone's head, right? Most people are not going to really clearly let you know how interested they are. So you need to ask them a good question. See, the key to really being great about recruiting is asking great questions. And this is a great question to ask. And this is in here in step number 3. They have a question. Let's say here's how the interaction with most green apples are going to go. They start asking you questions like, hey, great, let me just ask you this first. Okay, because we'll get those questions answered. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no interest whatsoever, 10 being you are ready to sign up or become a customer today, where would you say you are right now? Great question, because it will force them to really quantify how interested they are. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 not being interested, 10 ready to do it, where are you? And they're going to give you a number. And I'm going to tell you whatever number they give you is great. As long as they don't say 1, that means they're interested. If they say, well, I'm at a 2 or a 3, now look, you got a long ways to go, but that means they're not saying no yet. So that's good, right? But find out what that number is. And then here's the next question. This is $1 million question. Whatever they say, hey, you know what, Diana? Amazing. Let me ask you this. What would we need to do to make your 4 a 5, 6, or 7? What information would you need? What would you need from me to make that 4 a 5, 6, or 7? And here's the beauty of this. They will tell you exactly what they need. They will give you their specific objection. They will give you that exact question. And then all you say is amazing. Well, here's what we need to do. We need to give you that information. And then at this point, you need to know what that next step is going to be. Now, I'll tell you ideally, some sort of a 3-way call, or maybe for you, look, every company has their own process. Maybe you're adding someone to your Facebook group. Maybe you're doing a 3-way call. Maybe you're doing a group chat. Maybe you're inviting them to a virtual party. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't really matter what the next step is. As long as you're not the one being the expert, move them to the next step. Look, we overthink. Well, what's the next, right? It's just the next step. They're going to need to see 5 to 10 things. So don't overthink it. Push them to the next thing, and then just repeat the process over and over again. And let the process do the work for you. But here's what you need your big takeaway to be. You got to start saying less. You got to stop making yourself the expert, right? You got to really fight that urge, because look, I'm telling you, if you've been the expert, there's nothing harder than saying less. Start asking better questions, and then here's the thing, have fun. Like, listen, let me just remind you, we choose to do this. This is not a job. People are not forcing us to do this. We choose to do this. We choose to subject ourselves to this abuse every day. So why not have fun with it? Right? Why not, if I did nothing else today, then the next time you come across a negative person, in the back of your mind, I want you to imagine little Bob on your shoulder. I want you to imagine little Bob on your shoulder, and the next time you get somebody that tries to knock you down, I want you to imagine me, rotten apple, just whispering in your ear, rotten apple, run away. If that's all you can do, just so I can help you get through some of the negativity. We have in our community, we have an emoji. When somebody shares about a rotten apple, we just use the poop emoji. So that's like the poop emoji signifies rotten apple. So everybody knows if somebody posts about a negative prayer, we just do poop emoji. And then we laugh about it because we're like, rotten apple. Everybody deals with it. It's part of the game. So have fun with it. And I'm telling you, this analogy is really going to help you understand what your job is. And then all you got to do is you just got to keep putting more apples into the process to figure out the ones that you're looking for. So that's the message for today. I'm going to take a couple of questions. But listen, I want to just give you a heads up, and I want to remind you. Tomorrow is the last day of the challenge. I promise you, I saved the best for last. The message that you are going to get tomorrow will literally change your life if you understand it. We're going to talk about how can you leave these 5 days of this excitement and actually make a difference, right? Not just be how you normally are, where you get pumped up and then all of a sudden you get back into your normal life and the excitement fades and nothing happens. I'm talking about how can you truly leave this program and change your life. And I have a special message for you tomorrow, and I've got a huge announcement as a reward for those of you that had the faith to join me in this challenge, that have had the commitment and the courage to push through this. I've got a really exciting special announcement tomorrow, something that I'm only offering those of you that are in this challenge as a special thank you for being a part of this journey. So make sure you tune in tomorrow. So let's take a couple of questions here on this training before we go and get you on your way to sorting your apple. So what questions do you have for me? And by the way, make sure, just a reminder, make sure you print up your homework guide because that has all the scripts and everything in there that you're going to need. And by the way, also, not too late to promote to your teams. You can still register if you go to reviveyourdownline.com. We're leaving registration open until the end of the day tomorrow. And we will have some time for people to go back and watch the videos if they didn't participate. So, okay. So Molly's question is, talking less, is that also good when presenting products? Molly, great question. And the answer is absolutely. I talk about this in the guide. See, this is the big mistake a lot of you make, is when it comes to your products, you don't use third-party tools at all. And then what winds up happening is people buy. But then eventually you have the idea, you're like, oh, I should go talk to my customer and see if they want to become a consultant. And then what winds up happening is it might be a month or 2 months later, maybe a week later, you go to them and you say, hey, you should do this as a business. And you want to know the first thing they're going to think of? How you got them to sign up for the products. They're going to think of that interaction and they're going to base their decision whether or not they think they can and are willing to do that. So this is a huge mistake a lot of you make that are in product first companies. Product first does not mean that you're the expert. The same principle applies if you want to be successful at some point into converting your customers into consultants that are going to go out and help you grow your team. So great question. I'm glad that you asked that. So Marsha's question is, if we've already shared a video, asked their thoughts on it, and gotten a response, can we still use today's homework? Marsha, absolutely. I can go back to you and say, hey, Marsha, I know that you're kind of interested, but can I ask you a couple questions? Because I just really want to get a sense of where you're at. And I can go right into the green apple questions. Hey, scale of 1 to 10, where would you say you're at right now? I can go right, anybody that's in the process of making a decision, you can go right into that 1 to 10 question and figure out where they are and then ask the next follow-up to figure out what is the next step for them. So Becky says, I have several red apples, but they say they can't do it yet. They've got other expenses. So Becky, I'll tell you, a red apple that says they don't have the money is not a red apple. Now, they might be telling you they don't have the money as a way to put you off, or they may just legitimately not have the money, which I find really hard to believe because most companies have an option to get started that is not a lot of money. And let's be real, like if you really needed to get the money, you could get it, right? So to me, most of the time, that's just a put off. That means they're not a red apple. So I think you have to really get deeper into the objection and here, I'll give you a quick strategy, okay? I'll give you a quick strategy, and you may or may not be willing to do this or even understand. I'll just tell you what we used to do, okay? We were in a company that, I was in a company that was $500 startup, okay? So it was not a small chunk of change. Somebody told me they didn't have the money, and I really got a sense that they wanted to do it. I don't have the money, I want to do it, right? And I didn't have an option of like a lesser, like $100 pack, right? Because listen, if you have like $100 or less option for people to get started and they still tell you they don't have the money, then I'll tell you they're not that serious. They're just not that serious, okay? Because if you really wanted to change your life and if you really wanted to change your situation and you saw this as an opportunity to do that, you'd find a way to get the money, okay? But what I used to do, okay, is I would say to people, I would say, okay, Becky, well, let me ask you this. If money weren't an issue, right, would you be willing to get started right now today and get to work? Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. Here's what I'm willing to do, okay? I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to actually start to train you and work with you and help you start to reach out to people you know to see if we can find some that are interested, because wouldn't you agree it would be a great thing that once you got the money, that you already had customers and team members ready to go? Wouldn't that be an exciting thing to know that you've got a check? And don't you think maybe it might help you find the money sooner if you know you've got people that are ready to buy? And here's what would be interesting about this. One of two things would happen. Most people at that point would say, well, yeah, I just want to wait. And all that meant to me is they weren't being completely honest with me. But I actually did. I would have people that would say, okay, I'm willing to do that. And I knew they were genuinely being honest with me. They really wanted to do it, but they just didn't have the money at the point. I would literally, if I thought they were a good enough prospect, depending on what I had going on, like if I didn't have anything happening, I had the time to do this, I would train them and I would teach them how to reach out to people. And I had more than a handful of times somebody would do that and get somebody that was interested in buying the products or joining their team. And all of a sudden they get really scared because they realize that this person wants to do it. And then magically the money would appear. I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting? I even have had a couple of times where, and this, as crazy as this is to think about, this stuff happens. I even had a handful of times that the person told me straight up, I just don't have the money. I'm not going to do it. You sign them up. And I signed that person up. Right? Gave them every opportunity in the world. This person's like, dude, I'm signing up if you are. And literally, I signed them up. And that person went on to do something. So what I'm trying to get you to say is you can get creative with people, right? You can exert your influence. There are different ways to go about this. Now, if I get that you're just trying to yank my chain, I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to be like, hey, call me back when you get the money. And I'm going to the next person. So anyway, hopefully that helps some of you in terms of just some strategies of getting around that. So Hannah's question is, some of these rotten apples take a step further, start bashing your name and business all over social media, warning people about you. How do you deal with someone like that when they're speaking to everybody? Okay, Hannah, here's what I would do. If you did that to me, okay, the first thing I would do is I would pick up the phone and I would call you, right? And I would be like, Hannah, what are you doing? Like, where do you get off trying to bash me and my business? You understand that literally this is putting money on my family's plate. So the fact that you are bashing me, you are literally stealing food off the plates of my family. Do you realize that? See, sometimes you need to punch people in the face and let them know it's not okay. And you need to have that attitude. Like, you cannot do it, but if you want to go out and you want to trash me, you are stealing food off my family's plate and you are going to get punched in the face by me. And if you don't like getting punched in the face, then you better shut up. Okay? Now, I'm not condoning you to physically punch people in the face. You get what I'm saying. You hear the spirit behind this. You got to really dig in your heels. And maybe you're like, I don't have their number. Well, then you need to message them. And if they do not respond back with anything other than, you know what? I'm sorry, I didn't realize it. Here's what I do. Delete them from my entire life. And never again do I ever want to hear from them again. And I don't even care if I'm related to them. I will literally tell them, you are not in my life anymore. Like, I have no tolerance for that whatsoever. Now, here's the thing though. You need to let go of that. See, so many times we carry that negative energy with us. You just have to be like, address it head on. And then if they're not willing to change, they are deleted from your life and you bless and you release them. And then you just move on. And at the end of the day, here's what I will tell you. People that are legitimate prospects that you have legitimate relationships with are not going to be influenced by some trash talking hater on social media that just wants to go hate. So don't have the scarcity mindset to think that that's going to have a negative impact on your business long term. It's just not. If anything, she just did you a favor by revealing her true colors to you, and you just had a way to cut out a lot of unnecessary drama in your life. So, Caitlin's question is, do you think you could set aside the rotten apple and give them time to sit on it after you surprisingly left? Yeah, I mean, Caitlin, listen, if I leave you and you come back to me and say, hey, you know, I've rethought this, great, but I'll just tell you, it's barely ever going to happen. You're barely ever going to, I mean, it's not always the case, but I'm not going to expect it to happen, but that might happen, so you never know. All right, time for a couple more questions here, and then we got to go. So Bethany's question is, what is your favorite way to follow up when someone says they would get started on a certain day and then they ghost you? Bethany, I'll just follow up with you. Hey, Bethany, you know, I know we were supposed to connect, haven't heard from you yet. You know, I would just basically let me know if you're still interested. And if you don't respond to me again, then I view it as my job to do you a favor and just take this away from you. And I might reach out to you one more time, call you, leave you a voice message and say, hey, Bethany, look, I get by the fact that you're not responding to me that either you're no longer interested or it's just not the right time for you. And I just want to let you know, either way, it's totally cool. So this is the last time I'm going to talk to you about this. Thanks so much for your time. Hey, we'll catch up soon. If anything changes on your end, let me know. I'm just going to take it away from you. Because sometimes when you take it away from them and somebody doesn't feel pursued, it makes them want it more. Or here's the other thing will happen. If it really just isn't the right time for you, you will appreciate the fact that I was professional enough and that I cared enough to recognize that, and that I didn't keep pushing, like, let's be real, like network marketing has a bad name because of network marketers. Because of people that don't even listen or pay attention, and all they want to do is just try to pitch you and recruit you every time they see you, even though your actions are telling them differently. Don't be that person. So that would be my advice. Okay, one more question here. So Tammy's question is, how many times should you go? Tammy, I'm 2 or 3 times. Following up, if you're not, I'm out. 2, 3 times, third time, I'm out. I'm not going to continue to follow up with you. Final question here, and then we have to go. Jamie Lynn says, how do you deal with someone that has told you no, but they know both about your products? Well, Jamie Lynn, yesterday's video was for you. Yesterday's video was for you. Build the relational account with them. Make a deposit into the account. If you missed that video, go back yesterday and initiate that strategy. So, well, listen, everybody, we can answer all questions all day on this, but you got to get to work. So get out there, find your 5 people, sort your apples. Let me know how that goes for you, and make sure you're tuned in tomorrow. Spread the word to your team. Tomorrow is a message they are not going to want to miss. So make sure you're here for the final day of training tomorrow at 12 o'clock. So take care, everybody. Talk to you soon.